you hear this news from your doctor, you do some uncomfortable things, you clear out the pantry, you get healthy recipes, you start your subscription at the gym. A few days in, it's feeling hard like it normally does. Of course, you're trying to make these big changes all at once. You get invited out to a party, life happens, right? Stress at
Hmm.
work happens. And then all the big changes you started to make feel hard in that fear state of, look, it's not working again. There's something wrong with me that I
Hmm.
can't do this. And being in that over heightened fear state makes those long-term changes so much harder because they revert back to the eating behaviors that they were doing habitually for years and years.
Welcome to the CoachMD Podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. And today, joining me on the CoachMD podcast, I'm so grateful that she's here today, is Megan, who has a great story about her healthcare journey and her weight loss journey. It's pretty amazing. And we're going to talk about that. And Megan and I were chatting a little bit before the start of the show, and I was kind of filling her in on my history as a doctor and my evolution as a personalized doctor, really interested in the whole person, dealing with what affects our health, not only our physical health, but what in our lives, how that impacts our health. And also when someone becomes obese, there are situations and there are circumstances which lead up to that. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, how that developed and what people can do now and what Megan's doing with her clients to help them so they can stay fit and healthy. And we're also going to talk a lot about in our society these days in the media, there's been kind of a almost kind of a shifting of almost accepting an unhealthy body, an unfit body, in the name of being beautiful and accepting people the way they are. Yes, I'm all for that, but we're going to talk a little bit about how that is kind of looking at health, fitness with kind of the wrong glasses. So Megan, thanks again for coming on today. And if you would just introduce yourself and tell us what what you're doing with yourself these days.
I love how you worded that question.
Yeah.
My name is Megan, Megan Gaul. I'm from Staten Island, New York. And right now, for the past few years, I've been working as a health coach, working with folks who have a weight loss goal specifically. And I came to that very circuitously. I started off as a teacher in the city. I did a little directing a tutoring program. I worked in a nonprofit. So I did a lot of different things that didn't have to do with health at all.
Mm.
And the reason I came to this over the past year or so to want to offer health coaching is because my personal weight loss journey in over 2018 to 2019, but really since then, because I've still been working on it, my personal health journey of losing 100 pounds and working to
Wow.
stay in a healthy weight range really led me to notice how much a journey like that can change what people view they're capable of. And that change was really profound for me, that understanding that I was capable of more than I thought I was. That really led me to want to bring that change and that new understanding to other people who are struggling like I was. So weight loss is just one area where you can prove to yourself you can do a hard thing. But I think for me, I wanted to help people because there's so much doubt and confusion
Mm.
and guilt in the realm of weight loss and trying to manage a relationship with food. So to feel more free of that is a gift that I want more people to be able to give themselves. So that's why I've arrived here in 2024, having begun working with clients one-on-one to help them do that for themselves too.
Love that. Love that. Tell me now, 100 pounds is a lot. And, you don't look like a big person, a big boned person, if you will. A lot of people will say that, oh, I'm big boned, that's why I'm obese or overweight. So tell us how you started gaining weight, or what was that like? How old you were? What was your family dynamic? Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. That's a piece that a lot of people don't ask about, but it is key to when you're unraveling that later.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I had not been overweight or obese as a child or as a teenager. I began, very factually to be overweight in college, like many of us do.
Hmm.
And in the time since college, in early adulthood, I believe I made a transition at some point to being obese. Um, and there was one period in college where I purposefully lost weight. So that was kind of the first time I tried to
Hmm.
purposefully lose weight, and it did not stick for various reasons. And a lot of us have experienced that too. Um, but I believe, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can lead to someone weighing more than what we all say is healthy, than what really feels good in our bodies.
Hmm.
I For me, a big piece of it was I grew up in a home that had lots of healthy food. We always sat down to meals together. We very rarely went out to eat, but there was a lot of, I guess I would call it control, a little bit of control over snack time, meal
Mm.
time, a little bit of oversight. It wasn't crazy, but a little bit of oversight into why are you eating that now? We're going to have dinner in an hour or two. That kind
Hmm.
of a feeling of someone else is in charge of you eating. Um, and so if we feel that kind of control, like I remember a very specific instance where I really wanted as a kid, I think I must have been 7 or 8. I
Hmm.
really wanted something that was sitting on the counter. I think it was like a cake or some cookies or something. And my older brother said, well, why don't you just get up on the counter and go get it? And I didn't think I had the freedom to do that, but
Right. Wow.
always remember that time because it's when I first started feeling like I had to hide or sneak food.
Mm.
Maybe a lot of your listeners or a lot of folks have experienced that too. That if they're alone in their car, that's when they tend to eat a lot. Or if
Yeah.
they're yeah, so that kind of secret eating is something that I got into the habit of. Um, and I think the other piece of it, I think there's two more pieces.
Hmm.
One, being in college and having a little more freedom to eat the way I wanted, always having access to a buffet when I wanted it,
Right.
and and being able to go to fast food or a restaurant whenever I wanted to, and have those things that I never felt like I got to have as a kid. That opened the floodgates, and it just felt easy to go get those things. And it's very easy for many of us to eat more than our body needs
Mm.
to make its weight because of how society is set up, because of how fast food is on every corner. All social events revolve around food. You're always eating around, sitting around the hors d'oeuvres for hours, and it's easy to just kind of chomp down without thinking about it. So there's a lot of mindless eating that our society really enables. So I think that was one piece. And then the final piece that really came to light after college, or at least I noticed it most after college. I'm sure the roots were before college,
Hmm.
but I really noticed a behavior of, uh, I'll give you an example. So when I was a tutoring center director, I had a split shift. So I had 2 hours in the middle of my day between work shifts. And instead of using that time to maybe like go to the gym, take a walk, read, catch up on other work, I would use that time to go to a casual restaurant or a fast food restaurant or a cafe and order enough food that would allow me to fill up that 2 hours, just kind of sitting and eating.
Hmm.
So that piece of it, I didn't understand at the time, but that was a big indicator of trying to numb out from the day using food. So little pieces that a lot of people have, in their lives. They might notice those patterns in their lives. I had them all together, and that contributed to me being 235 pounds at my highest.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great kind of giving us the picture of what was happening. And one of the things that in my practice, I became Coach MD. And one of the reason why I became a Coach MD and started coaching my patients is that I started looking into kind of the nitty gritty of what causes what causes me first. I was looking into myself, and it was kind of a self-analysis that generated my writing. And so I wanted to look, what got me nervous, what would make me
Mhm.
anxious, what would make me feel down. And what I came about, what I've written about in my book, Brain Drain and Fake News Stories by Your Brain, is that we have what's called an automatic brain, which is our primitive primal nature. And that automatic primal nature has only one it only has one direction, and that's to protect us from danger, threat, or vulnerability. And what I've identified is that the big three dangers that we fight and flee, and that's the reaction that we get to get away from danger, threat, or vulnerability, or is what I call the one-up danger, the uncomfortable, unfamiliar danger, and the loss of love danger. Okay.
Mhm.
And those three components are very active when somebody is doing behaviors that are counterproductive to health or behaviors that are going against what they really want to do. And what you're talking about, Megan, what if I'm going to fit it into my kind of paradigm of explanation um, in our primitive instincts, is that a lot of times uh, what causes people to be overweight or obese has to do with their childhood, it being a familiar setting where everybody in their family is obese or overweight. And the unfamiliar, okay, so unfamiliar is danger, is to
Mhm.
be fit and healthy. So every time someone tries to be fit and healthy, they fight or flee that back into the obese part. Okay, so that would be a childhood where the familiar was obese, but in a childhood that maybe, and this is not to say that you had a bad childhood, because I'm a parent of 4 adult children now, and I'm far from a perfect parent, that's for sure. And even if I was a perfect parent, perfect, okay, there's no such thing, but our brain is being developed from birth to adolescence. So we put together crazy connections that we form as children that are totally nonsensical, but
Mhm.
that's our child brain putting it together. And so if you're here having kind of a control over food and you become uh, a little bit having it's now your decision, it's kind of a way of one-upping. And so when I say the one-up danger is that we fight and flee either being one-upped, okay,
Mhm.
or we want to put ourselves in a position so we can one-up others. And that's a protective way. So in order to protect ourselves from the one-up danger, we want to seek control and we want
Mhm.
to be. And so some people, I would think, and it sounds like that might have been somewhat of the trigger at first to start that going. But then when we start eating, it becomes familiar, a familiar pattern. And the unfamiliar, again, is dangerous. So we stay in that comfort zone, that uncomfortable comfort zone, that self-sabotaging comfort zone, but it's still comfort. The unknown is still more dangerous in a way than our comfort zone. So we stay there and we get stuck in that, and then the cells of our body even reacts to that primitive system, that primitive nervous system. And that's why we're going to talk about this in a little bit, Megan, how you started to make a change, because the cells in our body get so used to that environment, that internal environment of
Mhm.
fat and the chemicals that fat releases, because the fat cells release chemicals that are not good for us. And but our cells are bathed in that familiar pattern. So they get stuck and they keep us stuck, and it's hard to break out of that. So if you could tell us now, so you're slowly gaining weight, right?
Mhm.
As you're teaching and you're in college teaching and you're slowly it's starting to accumulate and your body
Mhm.
is starting to get more unhealthy, more unfit. And this is not, I may have to put this out there because there's so much talk now, on social media and the media about, when I say unhealthy, yes, it's unhealthy. It is unhealthy to be obese. It is. Okay. I mean, this is not an unconscious bias that I have. It's not a bias. I'm not fat shaming. As a doctor, I know that obesity and fat cells, adipose tissue, creates an internal environment that sets you up for insulin resistance, which leads to diabetes, heart disease, cancers, you name it, vascular disease. I mean, anything. It's just not good for us. So as your body's getting heavier and unhealthier, what was when did it like hit you that this is something's going wrong here?
That's a good question too. And I appreciate you kind of uh, prompting that catalyst moment. I think that for me, it wasn't the understanding that I was obese. And I think many people, um, I think, funnily enough, I think that was the reason that I was able to change because I didn't look at it as I need to change the fact that I'm obese or the
Mm,
fact that I'm fat. Um, a lot of people get stuck in that because society does, like you said, spend a lot of time, um, re- you know, sh- reiterating that fat is not good for, especially if you're a woman. All around you, there's examples of women who are seen as competent and sexy and awesome, and they're never fat.
right,
That's
right,
the thing. That's
right.
something you
Yeah.
see growing up constantly. So
Uh-huh.
a lot of us get stuck in, I need to fix myself by getting skinny. I need to become accepted by
Mm,
being skinny.
yep.
Um, for me, it might have been like that the first time I lost weight in college. I noticed like I I'm bigger than I want to be. I saw a picture that didn't look like me. I wanted to become skinnier for appearance reasons. And I think that's one huge reason the changes that I made did not stick. Um, because it wasn't a deep enough reason for me to keep those changes in my life
Mm,
consciously. Um, so the second and final time that I lost the weight, I did not try to become skinny when I started making changes. I said, I want to get help so that my eating doesn't impact my life, so that
mm,
this cycle of eating and feeling guilty about eating and eating in response, like you mentioned, to that lower brain, um, primal brain. I'm uncomfortable in this emotion. I'm uncomfortable feeling uncertain. I'm triggered by the stress at work because I feel very uncertain there. Um, all of that lower brain nonsense happening in my head that was causing me to make the choice every day to zone out by eating because
mm-hmm.
it was comfortable in that moment, very comfortable to sit and eat and not have to think about how uncertain everything is at work.
Yeah.
Um, the choice that I made to start to go get help and start to make changes was from the impetus to change the eating behavior because I saw it as so emotionally harmful. I
Mm,
didn't really think that I could lose weight. I didn't even consider it. I was just so tired of being in that guilty state from
mm.
eating and then being guilty that I ate in that way and not seeing anyone else doing that and feeling very alone. So I think
Wow.
that was the piece that made me want to start making changes. It was not um, the very real understanding that being obese means, you have less energy. You're, like you were saying, it causes insulin resistance and all that. That didn't even enter my head.
Mm,
It was really about the behavior I was doing and how it did not feel like I was treating myself well. I think that was the big piece for me.
yeah. That's great. Yeah, I could relate to that. And so many I could relate just hearing the patient's stories over the years. I mean, I've had uh, patients over the years who, no matter what I said, if I focused on them trying to lose weight to prevent them from having getting complications from diabetes, and I would, scare them sometimes. I said, if you keep going on like this, you're going to have kidney failure, you're going to lose your leg, and nothing like that works. Okay, it
Mhm.
really has to come from, like you said, a deeply emotional drive, and sometimes, it's tricking that primitive brain of ours, and so it's sometimes making we fight and flee the familiar. I mean, the unfamiliar, the unknown, the uncomfortable. We fight and flee that right back to the familiar, the comfortable, and the
Mhm.
known. And sometimes we need to trick our brain to make the familiar, the unfamiliar familiar, the unknown known, and the uncomfortable comfortable. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can I say
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
there?
Go right ahead. Sure.
When you mention like it never really works when I tell people like your kidneys are gonna fail like
Right.
and that just sparked so much in my brain because I've talked to a lot of weight maintainers, people who are trying to lose weight, and other coaches, and what they hear is that the fear of a medical problem, it causes the sabotage, it
Yeah.
causes the actions that people are in that state of fear and they're not able to make decisions from their rational prefrontal cortex part
Hmm.
of their brain.
Yeah.
They're so, and I guess to put this in like a kind of daily context to get it more concrete, you hear this news from your doctor, you go home, you say, I got to clean out the pantry. This is serious now. Um, you do some uncomfortable things, you clear out the pantry, you get healthy recipes, you start your subscription at the gym. A few days in, it's feeling hard like it normally does. Of course, you're trying to make these big changes all at once. You get invited out to a party, or something happens, you have to go to the hospital to help a partner or a friend. All the life happens, right? Stress at
Hmm.
work happens, and then all the big changes you started to make feel hard because naturally you haven't tested them in these harder
Right.
experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's expected when you're making changes, but that fear, they're in that fear state of, look, it's not working again, there's something wrong with me that I
Hmm.
can't do this. And that state of fear that you said, when people either fight or flee or freeze, sometimes they go back to what comforts them in the moment. This is so uncomfortable that I'm used to over years and years. Food is the thing that brings me back and helps me feel calm. So, of course, being in that over heightened fear state makes those long term changes so much harder because they revert back to the eating behaviors that they were doing habitually for years and years. And do you, I'm curious about your understanding about the neural plasticity and how kind of the thought grooves, like if you have certain thoughts and certain behaviors that are linked together for a long time. um, I wonder like more about how that, I don't know, I always wonder like how that actually works, and because it
Yeah.
seems true, you have these habitual thoughts and the actions, and they go on for years and years, and then it's very hard to change them because your brain has done them so many times over.
Right. So the way I look at it, and what I tried to do, um, for myself, was dumb it down for myself. Okay. And that's why I came up, when I started writing my book, Brain Drain, it came out from, weekly messages that I used to send my patients. And it all started when a guy came to my office and said how great he felt while he was in my office talking to me, but then he'd go into his life and things would fall apart. And he was one of these people that was not in good shape. And so, he said, "Dude, we came up with this idea he asked me, what can you do to keep me on track?" So we came up with this idea that I'd send him a weekly email. And that kind of grew into a larger thing because I started to look into myself, because I am one who I have to walk the walk. If I talk the
Mhm.
talk, I got to walk the walk. And so I was looking to myself and trying to figure out what, what really sabotages us and what gets us in ruts. And I came up with this idea that we are really a duality. And this is not totally scientific. There are some guys and women who are real scientists, neuroscientists who really look into what's happening on the molecular level. I'm looking at it more on a macro level. And
Mhm.
so the macro level that I look at, and I came up with this idea of the automatic brain because it's automatic. The autonomic nervous system, is automatic. Meaning it just fires, and it fires.
Mhm.
The only thing it does is to protect us from danger, threat, or vulnerability. The habits are formed because they are comfortable and they are safe. And so those habits could be very bad for us, um, but they're safe. And that's why when you tell someone to lose weight, they are that's their habit is when somebody when they're eating to alleviate fear, like you said. So
Mhm.
now they're being told they can lose their leg, so they're frightful. If their comfort and habit is to self-medicate with food, because food does medicate it, it increases insulin levels. So that,
Mhm.
I mean, when we were our prehistoric ancestors, were they needed to store fat for for energy in case they needed it, or they needed to get energy quickly, so they take sugar. So sugar and fat were the energy sources. So if people are getting that comfort, they are falling back into it because they're going to fight. They're going to go to the comfort. So they're going
Mhm.
to fight and flee the uncomfortable. And so anytime, that's why the scare techniques don't work. So the brain, the way I look at it is that we're, like I said, a duality. We have a primitive nature, but I believe we have a divine nature. And that divine nature is connected with, in my belief system, it allows us to connect with a higher consciousness, which I believe is God. But certain people, if they're not in that in that realm, or they don't believe in that, it signals a higher consciousness, a higher ability, a higher strength that they
Yeah.
can access. And by accessing that is how they can break the habits, form new habits, again, make the unfamiliar familiar, and then make those changes. And it sounds as though that's kind of what you're tapping into when you help people make those changes.
100%. I think the fact that you have that duality of the lower evolutionary self and then the higher self, I think it's so common in like every belief system, a lot of different scientific or medical theories. It's interesting that we always come back to that division of like the lower
Yeah.
instant gratification self and the higher kind of long-term goal self. Some
Hmm.
people might call it their true inner selves, their divine strength, their some
Yeah.
people might say, my prefrontal cortex, my
Right.
decision
Yeah.
making
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different ways you can conceptualize it, but I think the the way I help myself and the way I help clients with making change that lasts is by getting more into the habit of bringing that higher self or that inner self to the forefront,
Mm.
because often it's in the background when we're living our lives kind of on autopilot, automatic brain, like you were
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
We're doing, we're doing the same commute, we're having the same breakfast, we're having the same kind of TV time in the evening. So, or a lot of us are just kind of stuck in like constant urgent life. Everything
Yeah.
is urgent,
Yeah.
everything has
Yeah.
to happen now. There's no time to sit and plan because everything is a fire to put out. So what I do with my clients is that we have a daily check-in and a weekly check-in, because those are times where you can sit, clear out what's happening like around you, the habit things, the automatic things, the fires to be put out, clear that out and get in touch with that higher self and remember the long-term goals that you had when you were that person thinking of thinking about it.
Right.
So a lot of people, like you were saying, you talk with them in the moment and they say, oh yeah, I can do this, this and that this week, and then it all falls apart during the week because they're always in that
Mm.
reaction rather than response. place. So what I find is that the daily check-in is a way to pound in a little bit of time in the day where that person then brings the inner self forward and becomes accountable to how the day happened, what they said they wanted to do and what actually happened, so that the next time they can plan a little bit better to do those things that they know are helpful for those long-term goals. So to be really specific, if a client has a goal to walk more, they can say, "Oh yeah, I can walk every day this week." They'll say, "I'm going to walk 7 days." The last 3 weeks, they haven't walked at all. So that's a
Right.
big change.
Yeah.
It's a big change they want to do.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, you do a little planning during the session of, okay, when is it going to happen? When a barrier comes up, when your kid is sick, what do you want to do to still stick to your goal when something interrupts your original plan? So you find little ways to kind of um, help them think about barriers and what they want to do when those pop up. But the daily check-in helps them in that day say, I did it, or I did not do it because of this. So
Mm.
tomorrow, I now have a little moment of this higher self time to think about tomorrow and to make sure I can, maybe I'll put it in my calendar, or maybe I'll put a post-it note to remind me. It's just a way to bring the inner self forward into the day. And I think a lot of people compare it with journaling or compare it with meditation. Journaling, meditation, any mind body activity, or this daily check-in are all ways to kind of clear out all the crazy, you know, automatic thoughts, all of the urgency,
Hmm.
and to get back in touch with what you want to do long term. And remember that you're only going to get there if we can bring those daily actions into your daily life.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And this is the reason why yeah, here I'm a doctor. I have the CoachMD podcast, and I don't interview a lot of doctors. Okay. And I interview people who have taken action in their life and who have made changes a lot of times despite their doctors. Okay. Because
Mhm.
what we're
Yes.
taught a lot is, so I remember back in the day when I was in medical school and even when I was in practice, we used to try to scare people to quit smoking. I mean,
Hmm.
my mother died of lung cancer. I mean, she lived a good life. She was 85 years old and but she died of lung cancer, and she smoked since she was 12 years old. And no matter what, here her son's the doctor telling her she's going to get lung cancer, her lungs or showing those black, lungs, or you see the commercials where you have the
Person
guys
breathing very
breathing
heavily.
right
Oh,
heavily or through
ooh.
the trach, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because one of the things, and with cigarette smoking, and I this dawned on me right from the beginning when I first started practicing and observing my mother. A lot of the addiction of cigarette smoking is taking a step back and breathing. That's why they
Mhm.
smoke, because if you ever see someone smoking, they're inhaling, holding it, and exhaling. I mean, that's breathing technique. That's what we
Mhm.
teach in yoga. That's what we teach in relaxation techniques.
Yeah.
So they're doing it all wrong, and they're sucking in pollutants, but so we're trying to scare them. And the
Mhm.
same thing with the food, and you're taking a step back, and you're saying that this is you're more than this. Okay. You can take
Yeah.
control over this. And it's it just happens that they lose weight and they get healthier, but it doesn't sound as though that's the focus, because when you focus on that, it has all the sense of guilt and
Mhm.
shame and anxiousness and all of that stuff, and it just never works, and they fall
Yeah.
back into it. So you talked about journaling, and I'm going to share some personal stuff of my own in a minute, but because I think it jives, and kind of some epiphanies that I've had lately. But I think it jives a little bit with the journaling that you're talking about. If you talk a little bit more about that, and how you implement that in your life to stay the healthy weight that you're on.
Love that. Okay. So for me personally, I never saw meditation or journaling as something that felt like me. Didn't feel like in my identity. Like I
Hmm.
felt like I was, logical, rational. These kind of things they feel a little woo-woo. They feel a little
Right,
like
right,
affirmations, just kind of get in touch with your higher self. You see me rolling my eyes.
right, right, right.
That was
Yeah,
my identity at the
yeah, I
time.
hear
Like
you.
I defined myself that way.
Yep.
Um, and so I had to start that practice. If I wanted to build that into my daily life, I had to start in a very logical, rational way that matched with my identity. So I think the way I did that accidentally was I started to keep a food journal. And I'm a numbers person and I love data. So I was keeping calorie counting, and I still
Uh-huh.
do actually to this day. It's kind of, it's just helpful to know where you're at.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's given me a lot of good data over time of like what keeps me in a healthy weight range and what doesn't. So I started at the very beginning and when I was trying to make changes to my eating, keeping a food journal every day. So the act of reflecting at the end of the day and writing or tracking it in an app, or the next morning, doing it for the day ahead, that kind of action was a method, I call it, of journaling, because it was a way of conceptualizing the day ahead
Hmm.
or reflecting on the day previously, and allowed me to either celebrate myself for, you know, eating in a way that felt good to me, felt healthy to me, felt like it was moving me towards my goals. And it also was, I was very adamant that I didn't want to cut anything out of my diet. I still wanted to have fast food on occasion. I still
Hmm.
wanted to have candy, chocolate, ice cream. I'm a big sweets fan.
Hmm.
So I was very adamant that I'm not cutting out carbs. I'm not cutting out anything. I'm going to just eat in different portions, and stay accountable to what I eat by writing it down, no matter what it is. I can fit anything in my day. I can eat all the things. I just want to be a person who stays accountable to the choices that I'm making. And the food journal itself, was such an easy 10-minute action every day.
Hmm.
And it made such a huge difference in my choices. It caused me to consider before making a choice during the day. I said, well, I'm going to have to write this down. Does this lunch feel like something I want to write down? Does this, I see 8 different appetizers on this table. Do I want to write down all 8 of them? Or do I want to look at 8 and choose the 2 that look the best? And, it was kind of an extra
Yeah.
check, an ability to get in touch with what I wanted to do long term, which was really to eat in response to what what my body needs, what I like, but not feel like I need to overeat, in response to emotions or anything like that. So I think what the way I got into journaling was through the food journal first, because it's the
Hmm.
same kind of thing, that daily check. And then over time, I started to use the brain dump activity, because I realized through working with a therapist that I was really struggling with, responding to feelings of stress and responding to anxiety. Um, that's what I was doing before. I was kind of trying not to feel the feelings of stress and just eating, and I wasn't even noticing the stress because I was just eating my way through it.
Uh-huh.
Um, so the brain dump journal activity is awesome because you just set a timer, clear out the room, clear out the distractions, and just write, hand pen to paper.
Wow. Love that. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
just for 5 minutes straight, anything that comes to your mind. Doesn't need to make sense, doesn't need to be full sentences, just write it all out. And you can just kind of purge it out of your brain, and it allows you to look at it and say, is this all true?
Right.
And if you have a ton on your mind, a ton on your to-do list, it allows you to look at it and say, do I need to do
Mm.
this? What are the urgent things? So that was another a way I realized that journaling could be helpful. It didn't have to be me writing, I am confident today,
Right,
which really
right.
did not appeal to me
Right,
because it didn't
right,
feel true.
right.
So I really liked the brain dump activity, and I still do that when I realize the to-do list is piling up or the anxiety is piling up. It's something that really has helped me kind of, get through whatever minutes of craving I'm having or whatever, if I'm tempted to like procrastinate instead of doing my work, all that stuff. We all have that experience too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of how I've built journaling in. And then over time, I had read more about mindfulness meditation. Um, and I started a daily practice of that probably in 2019 or 2020. And I think that has really helped me continue the work that I did with my therapist, which was just become more aware and
Mm.
accepting of thoughts and feelings that are coming up and not need to push them away or push them down. So the daily meditation was the final kind of, step of all that kind of journaling, the lead up of the journaling habit that I started building.
Yeah, I love that. And you're developing new habits that are healthier. And with the meditation, that's really how I start. I would meditate every day before work. And when I started
Me too.
writing, yeah, when I started writing, I would I would not even have when I wrote my book Brain Drain, I didn't have an outline. I didn't really know what I was going to write. I would meditate on it, and every week when I write an installment, it would come to me. And I call that, my inner inspiration or my divine connection, whatever it was. And um, it's interesting, getting back to the journaling. Um, I remember I tried that with a few patients over the years, and I had this one woman, you know, who was just brutally honest. I said, I want you to, everything that goes into your mouth, I want you to write it down and I want you to bring it to me next week. All right. So I'm telling you, it was a loaf of bread. I mean, not a
Yeah.
couple slices of bread, but a loaf of bread,
Mhm.
a sleeve of Oreo. She said, well, yeah, I think, I'm writing everything down, but I might have missed that sleeve of Oreos that I had in the middle of the night. All right. So,
Yes.
you know, obviously when you're doing the journaling, you have to be honest, but
Mhm.
personally, now people would look at me and they say, "Oh, Dr. Glassman, come on, you don't have any problem with your weight. You can't understand." And I would have this ready answer for them. I said, "Well, you want to make a bet? That you want to bet me? I want you to bet me $1,000, and you bet me that I can't gain 20 pounds in a month." And you're going to
Wow.
lose that $1,000 because I could easily gain 20 pounds in a month. If you
Mhm.
think about how easily you can gain over a weekend. I mean, how many
Mhm.
weekends go by, even with what you're doing? I'm sure when you're counting your calories, whatever, you'll notice you'll have a weekend where you're going out with your friends, whatever, and you're 2 pounds heavier. Now, think about when somebody is 60 years old, all right? And when they
Mhm.
were 25 years old, they were 100 pounds. They've gained 100 pounds from 25, let's say 25 to 50. Okay.
Mhm.
And now they're 100 pounds heavier. That's only gaining 4 pounds a year.
And that's very easy to do.
I
Very
mean, you could gain that in a weekend. I mean,
Absolutely.
right. So
And
yeah,
it's the way, like, and society is easily set up for it.
yeah,
Um, because especially in the US, the portion sizes are monstrous.
yeah,
Monstrous. But
yeah.
we've all been kind of surrounded by these portion sizes for many years, for decades.
Uh-huh.
And our eyeballs have, like, how the grandmas say your eyes were bigger than your stomach.
Right.
Um, our eyes are trained to these portions as being normal. They look like normal portions to us. And also restaurants, I'm sure just kind of pile on the oil and the butter, just much more high fat
Uh-huh.
ingredients than we would use at home. And so you can't see that on the
Mm.
plate because it's cooked in it, but you're eating just so much more. So to your point, it's very easy to eat in one day with a restaurant trip to eat 3,000, 4,000 calories. Extremely easy. I've done it. Like, it's
Yeah.
not
Oh, yeah.
not
Yeah.
hard.
No.
But I really love that you had your patient keep that food journal, and I love the brutal honesty,
I
because
know.
that it's so important. Then I wonder what she saw and what her new thoughts were after having looked at that week and writing it down, because it's different when you're doing it and kind of forgetting about it. But it's a whole new experience when you look at a full week and you say, loaf of bread here, sleeve of Oreos here, 3 plates at dinner here. It's so fascinating when you have it in front of you, the
Yeah.
difference of what you think about it.
Unfortunately,
For some,
I needed you to follow up with her because it never, yeah, we never were very successful.
it's hard,
Yeah.
and it's funny because when you see it written down, that's a really good first step. And the next step is then to kind of unpack, like, well, what was happening right before that,
Mm.
and what was the decision making process. Sometimes there is no process; it's just kind of happening without someone putting a thought between the impulse to eat and eating. And I've experienced that. And that's one way that I got to 230 pounds. And again, society is set up for that. You're sitting and eating with your friends or your family. You're not necessarily thinking before taking another slice of pizza. But then there's some people who are eating that because they're stuck in that thought loop, that primal brain state of,
Mm.
I can't stop eating here. I'm going to start feeling terrible. I'm going to
Mm.
have to face the fact that I ate all this. I'm going to have to face, the problem that caused me to do this in the first place, whether it's work stress or, grief, or someone, feeling rejected, someone feeling alone. Like, all of that is still there after the person is done trying to uh, ignore it through food.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. Like, that the writing it down is such an important first step, because a lot of people want to change right then, and it's easy for them to change when they see it there. But
Yes.
then a lot of people need that second step of, let me look at why, and let me see what small changes I can put into place so that those whys don't have to control me. I can put a change in next time that situation happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to know that, I mean, it's such a great feeling to have control, to have
Mhm.
that self-control. Self-control and self-discipline are two of the characteristics that go into a successful, healthy life. And we don't realize it. A lot of people say, well, oh, I love to eat. I'm going to eat. I love to eat. And they think that they're making that decision and they feel like they're in control making that decision, but really they're not. The food is making the decision. The situation's making the circumstance is making the decision for them. And so they're being driven on autopilot, not really even knowing that
Mhm.
having that self-control. And so I, did kind of an experiment on myself. So one of the things that I have done for years is what's called intermittent fasting, and not everybody could do that. I typically do not eat after, let's say, 8, 9 o'clock at night until noon the next day. I'll have water, I'll have tea or whatever. I never needed caffeine, fortunately, so I don't drink coffee in the morning. And so that's what I do. I'm not saying that that's what everyone should do. That's worked for me. So I went on this intermittent fasting plan because I was interested in what they were claiming. And I
Mhm.
did that for a week or 5 days, and it was very low calorie. And to me,
Mhm.
that's really it was the caloric restriction that was causing the weight loss because I lost 4 pounds. Now, that's I don't really need to lose 4 pounds. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm very well controlled in a range, but I realized if I could lose 4 pounds with that caloric restriction, because my weight, I work out a lot, and so I was thinking that I saw myself gaining a few pounds here and there. I would say probably over the last year, probably 5 pounds, let's say, and I thought that was muscle, honestly. But when I lost it so easily, I didn't think I lost muscle that easily. I think I lost excess that I didn't need. So I
Mhm.
started, this is the last 2 months, I've started doing journal through an app, my Fitness Pal. And so my Fitness Pal is an app where you can track your calories and keep, tight control of that. And I realized that, as you said right at the onset, we take in much more than we really need.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
my caloric intake for my size, I'm not a large stature person, and it is unbelievable the small amount of calories that you really need to sustain. And that's
Mhm.
not restricting yourself, so to speak, but it tells you that most people think they need 2,000, 3,000 calories a day. Most people need anywhere from 1,200 calories to 1,800 calories a day to maintain their weight. And that's even with someone like me who works out. If I went by MyFitnessPal, and so
Mhm.
this morning I worked out and it said I burned 600 calories. So they have that as a negative. So I'm putting my weight at my caloric intake, my goal of 1,300 calories a day. Okay, now
Mhm.
that seems like a small amount. And
It
they're
does.
saying now 600 calories a day. That so I can take in 1,900 calories. If I took in 1,900 calories a day, I would gain weight. So what
Mm.
I'm saying is that I love to eat like anybody else. So I end up eating more slowly. I
Mhm.
end up, if I'm going to go out, I'll make sure the day before I go out and I consume 2 to 3,000 calories, let's say,
Mhm.
the day or two beforehand, I'm going to be very careful of my caloric intake. And then the 2 to 3 days after that excess, I'm going to watch myself. So I'm going to eat more slowly. That's going to
Mhm.
be really enjoying my food. And I'm going to watch myself if I'm going to overindulge. So it sounds like a small amount, but for me, that's what's right. You have to find out, as you know, I'm sure, Megan, what's right for you. So 1,500 calories might be right for one person, and you're going to stay even, but 1,200 might be best for another person. So that's, it's really, and just, and I'm going to ask you to comment on this too, because a lot of people say, well, it's not the quantity of food, it's the quality of food. But if you're taking in 2,000 calories of quality food and your metabolism is only for 1,500 calories, I don't care what the
Mhm.
quality of that food is. You're going to gain weight. It's going to be stored in fat. You go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up MyFitnessPal because that is my preferred journal of choice.
Okay.
That's what I've been working on with since 2018. And I think the the beautiful thing is that MyFitnessPal gives you that starting number. And you mentioned you tested it out. You looked and saw what a certain level of calories did to your body weight. And I think that is such a powerful lesson for people to take away the experimentation to
Hmm.
find what works for you and the tracking of calories, not to start off restricting, but to get really curious about what your body needs at whatever, because everyone's age and muscle mass and activity level, all of that plays, and genetics plays a big role in what your body needs. So
Hmm.
you can't, a lot of people start, a lot of women especially, will start with 1,200 calories because it says it is what you're supposed to
Yeah.
do.
No,
It's
no,
the
no, no.
lowest that you're
Yeah.
allowed to do,
Right.
you know? And so for a lot of women, calories means I eat 1,200 calories and it's a very low amount and my meals are tiny and I can't go out to eat. And then the alternative when I can't do that anymore is to ignore tracking and to eat with abandon. So
Yeah.
that is the two worlds that a lot of people live in. I love that you brought this up because my goal as a coach, because I know it worked for me and I know it's worked for other people, is to allow people to see what the middle ground looks like. The middle ground is when you're keeping yourself accountable to what you're eating by looking at what it is, recording it daily, and understanding that you have a calorie level that is healthy for you, that isn't necessarily super restrictive or so over the top that you're not even wanting to look at it. You can find what that middle place is that will help you towards your long-term goal. So if you have 6 weeks and you write down everything you have for 6 weeks, you get your calorie average for that 6 weeks, and you know what your body weight did over that 6 weeks,
Hmm.
you can calculate your maintenance calories, your particular maintenance calories, not what any calculator says might be yours, but yours. You can calculate it for yourself within a fair degree of certainty, that's going to be better than what a random calculator will tell you.
Yeah.
And that For me, it was so freeing when I had that range of numbers to
Mm-hmm.
understand for myself. It felt psychologically safer because if I felt that I was on my weight loss journey and it was feeling hard, I was feeling restricted, I was a few weeks in and things were feeling like I can't do this for very much
Mm-hmm.
longer,
Yeah.
which people get to that point
Oh,
because you're
yes.
doing things,
Yeah.
yeah, you're doing things that you're not seeing your friends do, you're not seeing your family do, you're feeling different from other people, you're feeling like you're missing out.
Mm-hmm.
The knowing what your body needs to maintain its weight, even if you're not done losing weight, even if you want to hang out, you're still obese, you're still overweight, but you're at a better place than you were. So pause, and you can pause there because you can still track your food and you can still aim for a certain calorie level, but aim to maintain. And that is such a piece that many people never do. And the strength of it is that you now know how to keep the weight off. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're now building that skill of keeping the weight off because you keep the habit that allowed you to lose weight in the first place, the tracking of your food and staying accountable to your choices. But you are not trying to like just beat the clock the whole time and lose weight the whole time. So
Yeah.
I will say that the strength of knowing where your maintenance calories are is a piece that allows people to be more successful long term, because they can see what that looks like, what staying there looks like, and then they can really tell themselves, do I want to live life like this with these habits? Is it worth it for me to be a healthier weight than I was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can enjoy food. So that's the thing that people would always come back to me and say things like, yeah, but I love food. And my first
Me too.
question, yeah, I do also. My first question to them, how fast do you eat? Oh, I eat really fast. Well, if you
Mhm.
love food so much, why don't you eat more slowly? And as the Okinawans found out, right? If you stop when you're 80% full, you give your brain time to know that your stomach is truly full because your stomach takes 12 minutes or so to tell your brain that it's full. So if you stop when you're 80% full, in 12 minutes or so, you're going to feel that satiating feeling. So
Yeah.
eating slowly, I think, is really important. And also, I'm sure this has come up with people when they look at they feel, like you said, feel alone. They feel they're restricting themselves. They look at other people and they say, "Oh, I really don't eat that much," but they're comparing themselves to people who are eating twice the amount they're eating. They may be eating 5,000 calories a day themselves, but the other people are eating 10,000 calories, whatever.
Mhm.
So I think that your method of, don't try to think about losing weight, at least, 4 to 6 weeks into keeping your journal, see what
Mhm.
the foods do to you. And then by you just cutting back a little bit, you're going to see initially, especially at the beginning, it happens fast. And I was just shocked that this caloric, I mean, this fasting mimicking diet, it was
Mhm.
1,100 calories the first
Wow.
day, then 770 for like
Oof.
4 more days. It was honestly, it was unpleasant. I didn't,
Yeah.
it was almost like I was doing it with my wife and we were joking. It was like we're rationing, we're saving like the cracker, for
Yeah.
like, we're like in prison,
You
like,
really appreciate every bit
and
when you're trying to keep it
you
that low.
do actually, and so that with that respect, it told me, yeah, let me see where I'm at. And I still haven't gotten to the point where I know exactly what it is where to maintain or to gain or to put on more muscle, whatever, as far as the caloric intake. I'm playing around with that, but I know it's a lot less than I thought
Mhm.
it was going to be. And I think
Yeah.
that that's really a very important point, that you can still enjoy food like you're telling us, Megan, that you do and I do. And
Mhm.
like, I know last night we went to a get together, and if you saw the way I was eating, you would say this guy doesn't care about his health at all, right? But but I know how I'm going to behave today. I knew how I behaved yesterday as far as my eating habits go. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a balance. You have to have a balance.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that um, the calories are a way to really make it uh, clear and logical for yourself, which of course I really like. I leaned into that piece for myself.
Yeah.
But there's also everything surrounding that, all the things that affect where your overall energy intake ends up over time. And that's where it gets a little more out of the weeds and a little more action focused. So
Hmm.
that's the other piece to it that I really like. Once you understand the calories that you're aiming for, once you've taken that step to keep your journal and see what's happening, then you can really look at your habits, your daily habits, and see what helps you eat in a way that gets you the right energy level for your goals over time. So when I first started, when I was 230 pounds, I was eating out, probably 6 dinners a week. I didn't cook at home.
Mm.
Right now at 135 pounds, we cook probably 6 dinners in and one night out. So that's one example of a big habit that definitely created a change in my caloric intake over time. So
Yeah.
that habit alone really helped. Even if I wasn't tracking calories, it would have done that. So that's one piece and I didn't make that jump right away. That actually was a much later change that I made. Dinners were the hardest thing for me to change. Um, for a lot of people, breakfasts and lunches are slightly easier because it's more in their control. They don't have to manage it with the other people in their household. They
Hmm.
can just plan it for themselves. So I like to recommend that folks start with, making a change to their regular breakfasts first and then their regular lunches first. Because once you get into a daily groove with those and you have some in the rotation that you really like, that makes a big difference to your calorie intake. And I think the other piece of it is when something interrupts your daily routine, you get to choose how often you interrupt it.
Mm.
I think I really wanted to go out to eat a lot at the beginning. I wanted to keep takeout tacos and pizza in my life. So you know, I was doing that. And then over time, once I felt ready, I said, if I want to make this change, am I okay with saying, I'm going to eat at home and meet you guys for drinks afterwards? Like, or am I okay with, I already made my dinner, but I'm going to come, at 7 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock and meet you all. So it's like finding those little places where your decisions in the week are different, like fun and getting used to doing it that way. Because a lot of people we all get out of the habit of doing that and into a habit of everything's crazy. I'm just gonna go
Right.
out to eat for everything. But I think it's a matter of always checking back in with yourself and reminding yourself, okay, I do want to stay in a healthy weight range. Is this a time where I can say, I'm gonna stick to my guns and eat in a way that I know works for me and still hang out with everyone, still, be a part of life and make sure I'm not missing out, but not necessarily make food have to be a part of that. I think that's a
Yeah.
piece that a
Oh, I
lot of
think
people have a
that's,
hard time separating the food.
yeah, I think it's so important. And you're a normal person, okay, as
Mhm.
they say. And that's very, I think
Well, thank
that,
you.
yeah, I mean, but that's very important
Mhm.
because you connect with people and you know the lives and our social lives are very important. And what you're creating is what I like to say is that you're making the unfamiliar familiar. So you're creating new habits where these were unfamiliar to people because we know that food, a lot of people will turn to food again for self-medication, and they'll say, and I'm going to ask you this about your journey in a second, you know, because initially when your body is programmed to be that weight, our cells are kind of stuck and
Mhm.
they react in certain ways. And if you change it up a little bit, sometimes it really feels physically uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times people, when you get the insulin spike and you feel that high or that the self-medication part, but then it plummets and you feel like almost like an alcoholic who has to drink to get rid of the shakes.
Mhm.
It's like you have to eat more to get rid of the down that you feel after the insulin goes down. So when you were going through, so you got, kind of going backstepping a little bit
Mhm.
to help people when they're on this journey, maybe working with you, and you could say that what you felt and what you see some of your clients feel as you're starting, because I'm sure, it doesn't go from 0 to 100, or 100 to zero. Okay. So there's a lot of transition and a lot of challenges as somebody is starting to get healthy, establish a healthy weight fitter. What was that like for you? And how do you translate that into your help with your clients? And this is kind of, again, we're kind of backstepping, but I think it's important to cover that a little bit.
Like, what does the starting look like? That kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, what
what does
is
it mean to
this?
get started?
Yeah, it's getting started, and people may not feel so good right at the beginning for
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
reasons, physically and emotionally.
That's a great question. I think physically for me, I would love to hear more about the way the fat cells react, because that's very unfamiliar to me, and I'm trying to think back of my experience and noticing my body not feeling great at the beginning. And I don't know if I had a ton of that. I remember one particular experience right at the beginning when I was starting to journal my food, and I had made the decision to not start a bag of chips after dinner. Like, me and my partner were watching TV, and often we would have, snacks. And I had made the decision in advance, I'm not going to have the chips tonight. I'm going to see what that's like. And I remember sitting on the couch and feeling so mad and uncomfortable and
Right.
frustrated. It was like my lower brain, my primal brain was
Hmm.
going crazy. I was like, "Ugh, I said I wouldn't do it. I want to do it." Oh, it was so uncomfortable for me. I remember vividly that moment. Um, and I got through that, and I think I went to bed. I think that was my decision. That was how I got
Okay.
through it.
Not a bad decision. Yeah.
Yeah, I sat through it for, 15, 20 minutes, and I was like, bed is going to be better than sitting through this. But I was so proud of myself the next day for having sat through that,
Mm.
because that anger was not harmful to me. That frustration wasn't physically harmful to me. It didn't, put me in danger, even though I thought I was in danger. I felt that, this feeling is so uncomfortable that I'm in danger. I think my body was saying that. Um, but I was very proud of myself the next day for having gotten through that moment. And I think it really taught me that I don't have to listen to every thought or every feeling that
Mm.
pops up, especially if it's one that I've seen before um, leads to eating in a way that has contributed to me being obese. So that piece of it, that moment of being proud of myself for having gotten through that, was a good teacher that I could try it again another day. If that moment happened again, I had a piece of evidence that I could be successful there, and it really was a choice. It was not me being forced to eat something against my will. It was me making a choice to
Mm.
quiet that anger by eating something. So I remember that moment near the very beginning. So that might be related to
Yeah,
what you were
absolutely.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a broader sense, the getting started, for me, it was number one, reaching out for help. It was reaching out. In my case, it was emailing some local eating disordered specialists or cognitive behavioral
Hmm.
therapists, finding someone who could take a look at my situation with an outside perspective and help me get out of whatever thing. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what I was doing wrong at the time, but I knew
Mm.
there was something wrong. So having a second set of eyes was huge. The second piece was that person that I went to, a therapist, prompted me with an action rather than really getting into the nitty gritty, the background of why I was eating this way. She didn't prompt me with getting into that right away. She just prompted me at the end of the first session with, "Do you think you could drink an extra glass of water every day this week?"
Mm.
And I said, "Yeah, what difference is that going to make? Of course I could do that." But by the end of that week, when I had done that, it was another piece of evidence of I I have made a choice to do something differently, and I saw myself do it every day. And that really snowballed. So my advice to someone starting off is start off small. Find one action based
Mm.
that you know is towards your goals, that you don't have a lot of resentment towards. I didn't have resentment towards eating, having more water. If
Right.
she had told me, can you try having a healthy lunch every day this week? I would have said, no way.
Yeah.
No way. I was not ready. I would have been resentful towards that.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's the big thing that stands in people's way, trying to make a change that they're not agreeing with yet. So I would advise, find a small change that is in the direction you want to go, that you agree with and that you can see yourself doing, that you're 95% sure that you can do by the end of the week every day. Um, and that's how I think that's a huge piece of why I was successful, because I didn't change things all at once. I chose small changes one at a time.
Yeah. I love it. And it reminds me of the story. I've told this a million times. I've written about it. I made a reel recently about it, and it's back. It's a story that was I read when I was into the martial arts back in my 20s. It was from a book called Zen in the Martial Arts by Joe Hyams. And this 10-year-old kid comes to his sensei, who just started karate, and he says to the sensei, what will it take for me to become a black belt? How long will it take for me to become a black belt? And the sensei said to him, 10 years. He said, 10 years, that's twice my life. I even if I practice every day and do all the things you tell me to do, how long then, sensei? He said, 20 years. And so the boy looks at him, he's 20 years. He can't believe he doesn't know what 20 years is at 10 years old. And so he says, well, what if I came and lived in the dojo and I slept and I ate and drank karate and did everything, and my whole life revolved around karate? How long would it take me to get my black belt? And the sensei says, 30 years. And this boy just is so frustrated. He says, I don't understand. And the sensei looked at him. He says, son, if you have one eye on your goal, you only have one eye on the path in which to find the way. And so
Mm.
we get blinded so often by the enormity of our goal. So if you started off your journey and said, okay, I have to lose 100 pounds, you would never do it. It would be too immense,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be paralyzing and too scary. And we talk about our primitive brain fighting and fleeing. We're going to fight and flee. But if you focus, as you said, on those daily steps, those small steps, really focus on it. By the time you get to the next step and the next step, and you make small goals and you're accountable with the data driven. I love that also,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm into that also. I was a math major in college, and so
Love it.
I still have that piece of me that even though I was a medical doctor and I don't ask me to do calculus or, I mean, algebra now is but I was linear algebra and all that stuff. It was great. I loved it. I couldn't do it now, but yeah, I mean, just those small steps. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's beautiful what you're talking about, because I think that really helps people from getting blinded by this immense goal. Oh, I have to lose 60 pounds. Oh, I have to lose 50 pounds, whatever. But if you do it one step at a time and make
Mm-hmm.
them intentional, I think that's how you get success. And that's how you succeeded, it sounds like.
Yeah. Oh, that was a beautiful story with the karate master.
Yeah, I know.
I have never heard that one before, but it
Yeah.
really resonates with me. I think the focusing on the end point, it is so far away, as you said. It's so far away. Feels like we have no influence over it whatsoever. And it's a waste of energy, I've learned, to look so far ahead that it's not something you have direct control over. We don't know
Hmm.
what could happen in
Right.
5 years. Our lives might be completely different. No matter what my plans were, life happens. I could be living completely differently now
Hmm.
then than I am now. But what I do have control over, full control over, is what I do in the next 5 minutes, what I do in the next hour.
Hmm.
Um, and if I get in touch with my long-term self and say, if I want to get there, what are the actions that someone has to take now to do that? Then I totally change my focus onto the actions that I can do now. And I'm still working towards that. So that is much more likely and possible. And now I have the steps that I can focus on day to day and check in on with myself day to day about whether I'm doing that. So that is another reason I love the data, because I love looking back a little bit and
Right.
looking at the past 4 weeks. I'm like, well, if I said I wanted to be consistent with this habit, I'm looking here and I believe I was 82% consistent. Am I okay with that? Do I want to
Right.
focus on this? Am I ready to add something new, or should I bring this up to 95% before I do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people start on a journey when they have a very strong emotional attachment to that end outcome. And like you said, I think that really stands in the way of the calm that it takes to pursue it day after day and get there, because we're so emotionally attached and we're so worried about what will happen if we can't do it. And I think it really worked in my favor that accidentally I was not trying to at first lose weight.
Hmm.
I started doing those things to feel calmer with
Mm.
my relationship with food. And when I proved to myself that, oh no, this is changing my weight over time. I haven't thought about weight loss for a while, but it seems like it's much more possible now. And I didn't set out to lose 100 pounds either. I set out to slowly lose weight over time and see where it got me. So I think that piece of not being overly attached to a certain number, a certain timeline,
Hmm.
and simply focusing on really liking what I'm doing day to day. I'm not cutting out dessert. I'm not I'm not forcing myself to go to the gym. I'm walking instead. I'm finding what I like to do
Hmm.
with these
Yep.
things, the actions that will help me get there that I actually like. So I think that saves you a lot of grief, because you're not putting yourself through things that you don't enjoy, and that things that will fall off later when you realize how much you still don't like them.
Yeah. Oh,
Saves
yeah.
you a lot of grief when you don't
Yes.
start doing things that you hate.
Oh, it's great advice. And the key word, the key operative word here is action. And
Mhm.
that is lacking in so many of our lives, is actually taking the action steps. We say we want certain things and we want to do certain things, and it takes action, and it takes taking that first step, taking you know the slow steps. So yeah, I think this is we're jam packed with great life advice. And Megan, you've been great. I'm
Yeah.
gonna think about a couple things. I'm gonna say a couple things, take home messages, and I want you, if I leave any out, you fill them in. So I think the the couple. Well, actually, why don't you start? Give me, uh, your, and I'll fill it in if I with some of the things that I've done personally and in my practice. But why don't you start with kind of giving us a little summary of maybe, you know, some steps that you think would be important for people to remember. You've mentioned a lot of them during this, and it's great.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can leave them with a list, our listeners with a list of things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's get concrete, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking to make changes with your eating, and if you or if you're looking to find a lower weight over time, one great thing you can do in the next 5 minutes is to get out, a blank piece of paper or a blank journal that you have lying around, and set yourself up with 14 dates in a row. Each page has a date, and try keeping a paper pencil food journal for 2 weeks. What you're doing here is getting very curious about what life looks like for you right now. You can't make any changes if you don't really know what you're doing. And so many of us are in that urgent life kind of place that we don't know what we're doing. So, number one, keep a food journal for a set amount of time. And at the end, take some time to really look at it and see what's happening now. That can open up so many new ideas about an actionable step you can take next to go towards your goal. So that would be number one. Food journal is my favorite tactic to get started with any health change.
Hmm.
Another thing that I think we talked about and that could really use some reiterating would be staying kind of staying data focused and neutral, um,
Mm,
rather than getting really attached. And I know it's hard. It's very hard
yeah. Yeah.
to not get attached to an outcome. But we talked about the fear response and how it can sabotage you. And so you're going to be okay. You're okay just as you are. You're going to be okay if you can't make a change right now. You have a little bit of time to step back
Hmm.
and get into a calm place before you start going crazy and trying to overhaul your life. So, um, do anything you can to foster a sense of calm in your day. So, really concretely, that could be 2 minutes of mindful meditation. That could be, like you were saying, deep breathing as a response, instead of smoking.
Right.
two
Yeah.
minutes of deep breathing. Foster some big thinking space in your day, some long-term thinking space in your day rather than that urgency.
What
So
about
all
that
that is
brain
to say,
dump that you talked about? That
oh my,
what
yes,
what is it
the
called? The
brain dump.
brain dump,
All
right?
you have to do is set a timer for 2 or 5 minutes and just get your thoughts out on paper completely. Just almost have a vomit response
Right. I
from
love it.
brain to pen onto paper. So those are all ways you can get rid of the emotional attachment to what you're trying to do and get into that calm space instead of the fear space. So those are the two big ones I would say. Like, start that food journal and find one concrete way, whether it's the brain dump, whether it's journaling, meditation, to foster calm rather than fear.
Love it.
Um, those are mine. So what do
Yeah.
you
Okay.
think?
So yeah, now I know you love food. Okay.
I
You
love
do,
food.
my audience does, I do. So talk about mindfulness. How about mindful eating? How
Mhm.
about really closing your my children when they were younger, I would close my eyes and I would chew my food and they would laugh at me, but I was teaching them that really try to savor the taste, eat slowly and stop when you're 80% full. Um, because as I mentioned, it takes time for the brain to know that the stomach is full. And also, we talked a little bit about, well, actually, I'm going to, backing up to the food journal, what Megan's talking about, you have to be brutally honest.
Mhm.
Anything that passes your lips, you have to write down on the paper.
Yes.
And that was good advice from a financial guy I once talked to. He said that what he tells his clients that any type, now it's everything's digital, whatever, but back in the day when you're, pennies or coins or dollar bills, whatever, would say any money that exchanges your hands, you write down. So anything that passes the lips, you got to write down in that journal. You got to be honest because you have to
Mhm.
know what your baseline is.
Yeah,
And
you won't get a full picture of what's happening if you don't do it. Like, it's a
yeah,
disservice to yourself not to put everything down.
yes, exactly. And it's also do what I do. I'm sure Megan does this. Is don't don't pile on the food. So, for instance, if you go out for a large dinner on Saturday night, don't have a big brunch on Sunday. Okay. Don't have and don't set yourself up for failure and say, okay, I'm going to have one cheat meal a week. Don't
Mhm.
say, don't give that because what happens is that one cheat meal a week becomes two. Because if you have your one cheat meal on Thursday and then Saturday comes, well, it's close enough to the next week. I'll have my cheat meal on Saturday. So that's 2 nights that week. And then you come to Wednesday. Well, it's getting, and then it starts adding up. So no, if you're going to plan out to eat and really go overboard, then you have to kind of time it and you have to know the couple days before, couple days after, you have to be particularly mindful of what you're eating. And so I think that, what you're doing, Megan, is really just great practical advice and actually with your work that you're doing, and I'll leave the link in the description of the podcast. Feel free to get in touch with Megan because Megan knows what you're going through. I could tell. Okay, she went through it. All right, she lost 100 pounds, which is no easy task. It's unbelievable. You see the shows like The Biggest Loser and all that. These people, a lot of also, actually, I want to just make a quick mention to people who go through major surgery for this kind of thing to lose 100 pounds. I would say in my practice, at least 80 to maybe 90% of those people gain it back and more because they haven't
Mhm.
worked out what Megan's talking about. They haven't fostered that self-discipline and self-control. They haven't made those concepts, which may be unfamiliar to them, familiar. They haven't trained their brain to switch like that. So they're kind of fighting and fleeing right back into that familiar, unhealthy lifestyle. So Megan knows what you're going through. I could tell you like to live life still and enjoy food and maintain a healthy lifestyle, healthy fitness level. So anyway, thank you so much, Megan. I really appreciate you coming on the Coach MD podcast. And to my listeners out there, it's me, as always, Dr. Charles, urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and in soul. Bye for now.